Hello, Ioannis. Nice to see you here in Moscow at PHP Russia conference. Please tell me a little bit about yourself, about your background. How did you come to development? What is your way?
Sure. First of all, thank you for accepting my speech and having me here. It was a very nice experience. And about me, I started software programming extremely early. I was basically 8 years old. So I first saw computers in my life when I was 7. I decided that I wanted to play with them, see what they do, whatever. And after a year or so, I started learning my first programming language. And apparently, I was quite good at it. Of course, that's a long time ago. Programming, it was called programming there. There was the notion of software engineering. We were programmers. It was very different than it is now. Imagine that this was actually before C++ was invented. So, yeah, the teachers there, because I was lucky, my school was probably the only school which had computers in my country, Greece, at that time, in 1983. And my teachers told my parents that, okay, this guy actually understands what's happening with computers, which was extremely rare back then. Imagine that the people who were teaching us were programmers from the National Telecom Organization of Greece. And they were one of the very few people who had computers and were actually doing programming back then. And this kind of stuck. So a few years later, it was the time for me to go to a university. And of course, I chose something pretty close, electronics engineering, which was half networking / computer programming and such things, and half electronics. And then I actually got a degree from UK university in computing and moved on like that. To be fair, I had already started working on my own before I even finished the university. I must have been about 16 years old or something. Yeah, and basically that's the beginning of my story. It was natural to me. It wasn't. When I reached the point that I needed to choose what university I would follow, what I wanted to do in my life, there was no debate about it. It was obvious what it was going to be. And
all right. You said that back then development was different from what it is now. How it was different?
People today don't have experiences of how the things were back then. The languages were different. Many of the concepts that we know today were not known to the vast majority of programmers. For example, despite the fact that object-oriented programming was created during the 70s. In the early 80s, there was a very closed group of people in the United States who actually discussed and understood these things. In most other countries of the world that I know, there were either very few people, maybe 10, or none who knew these things. So back then, for us, it was just procedural programming, and many of the things that we take now for granted to what constitutes code quality, back then they didn't exist. So basically, everyone was writing however he saw fit, and the results were obviously mixed. And it was extremely difficult for some programs to understand what was happening in there. That has obvious downsides. There were a lot of failed projects back then, but also people who had interactions with such code bases, they got the ability to understand things which are very complicated and very difficult, because something was basically illegible by today's standards, but this was what you had to work with. There was no notion that we need to rewrite this. The test back then, it was, it works or it doesn't work. And if it works, it's fine. You have the problem. So yeah, that's one aspect of the differences between back then and now. And of course, the major aspect, which is also an unknown to younger developers, is the restraints and the constraints that we had on resources. Back then, you were lucky to have a 10 megahertz 8088 PC with 64 kilobytes of RAM. We were byte counting back then. We needed to be precise to the byte in what we were doing. Right now, the attitude is, let's get another server. Let's get another slice out of the Kubernetes thing and have like 10 pods working for us. There is much less consideration these days in the general population of the software engineers about resources. Here in high load, of course, you can find people who are facing huge amounts of data and of traffic. And obviously, yes, they don't have this attitude. They know what they're doing and they act differently. But the vast majority of people don't give a second thought on how much RAM they're using, how many CPU cycles they need for whatever they do. It's just a commodity nowadays.
All right. So then, going back to your way, how did you find yourself in writing PHP code?
Yeah. So my first language that was actually usable was BASIC. I had learned Logo before, but that didn't have practical applications. You would either draw nice flowers on the screen or you would be moving robotic arms around with it. We didn't have robotic arms, so it was only flowers on screen in the beginning. But then it was BASIC. BASIC had obvious limitations and issues. And then you had a choice. Either you would go completely hardcore to something like assembly or C, or you would try your Pascals and such things of the era. For me, it was actually assembly and C. I started writing C, then C++ became more mainstream and known. So when I started working as a self-employed, I was using C++, writing code with Microsoft Foundation classes of all things for Windows, which was hideous, completely hideous. It was really bad, but that's what existed back then in order to make programs for Windows. And at some point, the internet was booming already. It was before 2000. Actually, it was 1998, 1999, around there. And all the craze was the internet. And of course, I had to see what do you do to program these things. Then they were called dynamic web pages. a colleague told me, there is this thing called PHP, and you can do fantastic stuff with it server side, and you can send different HTML pages to the front, depending on what the user does. I said, okay, let's look at that. Back then, it was exactly the time that PHP 3 had come out. So I had the chance to see a little bit of PHP FI code, and then PHP 3. And
PHP form interpreter?
Yes, PHP form interpreter was the previous version. And then PHP 3. And PHP 3 was amazing. It was extremely powerful. It was extremely forgiving, which was a breath of fresh air compared to the C's and C++ of that era. Even now, C is difficult. Not difficult to write, rather difficult to tolerate, I could say. But that's a completely different story. And it was amazing. So around that time, I met some people. We formed a company together, about 2000 or so. And they told me, okay, what can you do? I said, you know what, I have already learned the PHP thing for the web. I explained what you could do, and they couldn't actually believe it. They said, no, that's impossible. You cannot do these things. And I said, no, you can do them. I can show you. And one of the guys, there were 3 guys and myself, one of the guys says, okay, I'm going to tell you something, and if you do it, we are in business. We're going to be really good. And what he asked was to create a pizza. So he gave me graphics, which was the pizza base, different sauces that you could put on, cheese, salami, and such things. And he told me, okay, I want you to make something which, depending on the keys, on the buttons, that the user clicks on, I want you to display the pizza with all of the ingredients that he has chosen. And of course, I did it. And they were amazed. They couldn't believe that this could happen. I was essentially synthesizing an image by putting stuff one on top of the other. And you could take ingredients off, add ingredients.
You were doing that with PHP 3?
Yes, PHP 3. And once this happened, and it was PHP GD, I think, the library that I was using to make the synthesis of the image. I don't remember exactly the circumstances. I don't know if it was for that or if it was for a project slightly later. I actually had to write GIF encoder because back then GIF was proprietary and the libraries in PHP GD and such things did not write GIF because it was illegal to write GIF. So I made a library myself in PHP that was doing that with run length encoding and all the other things that GIFs have, and that's how it went. And we started a company, and the rest is history. I have been using PHP since then to this day.
All right, that's a nice story. So if I remember correctly, now you are an architect at Altenar.
Yes,
Altenar.
I am a software architect in Altenar.
Awesome. What advice can you give? What valuable things have you learned recently? What can you advise, basically?
My advice to anyone, especially people who are starting to get involved with software engineering and PHP, is to try everything. Try and fail. Failing is good. I have met a lot of people who have been using best practices all of their lives and who are very good until the first thing that goes wrong unexpectedly. And then they have nothing because their whole life they have been doing what the manual says and that's it. Unfortunately, real life stuff, especially when you're under high load, are not ordinary stuff. So if you are trained in the ordinary, you will have very hard time in everyday situations because everyday situations are not ordinary. You have to try things, a lot of things, and you have to fail a lot. And this changes both your perception and your abilities. Every hard problem that you overcome makes you much, much better. Okay, I'm not saying that everybody should just start writing spaghetti code and do everything wrong. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that one should not be restrained by the norm, right? You should be able to go beyond the rules.
I think your talk obviously shows that unusual decisions and unusual solutions can actually work and appear to be effective, and nobody would have probably tried APCu for that case, and it worked.
Yes. We need to be fair with this, right? For every time you succeed in something like that, you will probably fail 10 times as much. Okay, I understand that. It is true. But sometimes the only solution is something like that. And you need to have this way of thinking and of acting in your tool belt if you want to be above the average.
I suddenly thought that the problem here is that in your times there were not so many programmers and they were not writing a lot of books or blogs saying how you should be doing stuff, and so most people that were involved in programming, they tried a lot because they didn't know those best practices, and they were pretty. I don't think there were a lot of best practices which you could read from anywhere. And now all those people who tried those things in the past, like Martin Fowler and all those guys, they just wrote a lot of books and a lot of blogs, and now people are mostly discussing those best practices instead of trying something themselves. So this is kind of that evolution brought us to the place where we are right now. What do you think about that?
Yes, I think this is correct to a large extent. When I started, there were no books. There were two books that you could read. One, especially in my language, in Greek. One was for assembly, x86 assembly, and the other one was for BASIC. And they were very, very basic books. They didn't have any of the crazy optimizations that you can do with assembly stuff, nor did they have even the most obscure parts of BASIC. It was just very mundane things. Imagine that essentially software engineering books in my country, what I had access to, started taking off around 91, 92. So I was already 80 years in the whole thing when I started having actual tangible information that you could use to do things. Imagine that in my country, internet was not a thing before 2000. So essentially around 1999, 2000, it was really possible to get normal usable internet. Yes, there were before, obviously, internet connections with modems and such things. I was having connections with bulletin board systems, with modems, a lot earlier than that, but the information there was basically completely irrelevant to anything that had to do with software. You could find nice tricks for cars,
Yeah.
but not really something software related.
And I remember you couldn't have a phone call if you were using internet. Yeah.
It's either the modem or the phone call, and then your father would pick up the phone and just mess up the download that you were doing for the last 2 hours.
Yes.
So, yeah, a lot of us of that era learned things on our own, and there were no best practices, and we had to improvise a lot of things. Then there was the pioneers who actually started creating such things, and people became complacent, and they just learn by heart everything. They just follow blindly, and they don't have the ability to face some really tough challenges. Don't get me wrong, probably many of those guys write better code than me, because I have all of the, bad habits of the past, which I fought very hard to throw them out. But obviously still some things must remain. I don't think that I have managed to be, absolutely perfect. That's absolutely certain that I am not. And maybe some people who are also younger and have more exposure to these things, maybe in the end they write slightly better code than me. Sure, yes, probably. The problem is that all of these guys end up coming to me for advice when they face something that is out of the ordinary. And I'm not saying this like, look how good I am. No, not really. It's just the experience of all of those years that makes this possible. I know a lot of people from my era. I have kept some contacts from even those days, 90 something. And they are all like me. So it's not that I'm something special, it's just that that was the era. It produced this kind of people.
This reminds me, my father, who is good at building stuff from wood, from anything. And whenever some constructors, or how are they called, they come to build something in our dacha, they end up not knowing something, and he can always figure out a solution, or like 3 of them, and he always know how these things are done, although he doesn't build nowadays on a daily basis. He has a business, so he's working on completely different things, but he used to build a lot when he was a student. And he has a much more thorough understanding of things, which beats whatever these guys know. Okay, so when we had a pre-party, we had a nice discussion about Go versus PHP, and I actually asked my subscribers to ask you some questions, and one of those questions was exactly the one I have prepared myself. So, is Golang a replacement for PHP?
There is a lot of, let's call it partisan discussion going on about languages and such things. Before I say anything, I will stress out that it's tools, right? It's just tools. We need to calm down, relax, and see them for what they are. Now, these two are 2 different tools, in my opinion, for 2 different works. I love PHP, and when I start writing something, the first prototype will always be PHP. Why? Because I can, with very few lines of code, without having to worry about a lot of things, see if what I have in my mind will work or not. PHP in that is unparalleled. There is no other language which comes even close. And if somebody says JavaScript, hit him on the head. No, JavaScript is not something like that. JavaScript is a very problematic language. It's very easy to search the internet and see all the stupid things that are happening with JavaScript. There are even, constructs that you can do and place weird sequences of equalities and such things, and you end up with false equals true. So, no, JavaScript is not usable for me in that context. So PHP is extremely easy, extremely fast, and worry-free. This means that you can do a lot of things very fast, and if you know what you are doing, you can produce fantastic code with really minimal effort. You can interface with a lot of C libraries, which is a very big plus. You can do that with Go as well, but it's not that easy. And I mean, as easy as with PHP. It's relatively easy too, but okay. And in general, I think that if PHP didn't have a bad reputation from some things in the PHP 4 days, a lot of people would have been using, a lot more people would have been using PHP today. Go is a different thing. Go for me is C done right. You don't shoot a mosquito with a missile, right? You don't need Go to do things. You can do a lot of things with PHP, and Go has, in my mind and in my usage patterns, a different purpose, if you will. With Go, you can have a service up and running in no time to do some things and leave it at that. With PHP, you can do a lot more things in the domain of business logic, and people who are pro-Go will go nuts hearing this. Oh no, Go can't do anything. Yes, Go can do anything, of course, right? In that domain, of course.
Like many general purpose languages.
Yes, but the thing is, which is the easier? Which is the tool that you can be the most productive with, right? And also, which tool offers most conveniences for such things? In Go, for some things, they have added the empty interface, the any keywords, and reflection. These are native stuff for PHP. If you need to put features to do some things, which are essentially runtime, you realize that the language had some limitations that they needed to overcome that way. And these are frowned upon by Go developers. But in PHP, it's the way the things work. It's much easier to handle data. In Go, for example, we were doing something and we had to convert between a lot of things back and forth. And all of this was time-consuming. Yes, of course, it's much more secure, let's call it. But if you know what you're doing with PHP, you will never have such issues. I never had such issues with types and things and whatnot. And even in the PHP 3, PHP 4 days. So I think that PHP is much better for fast things, for doing something really fast. And I think that if you have an extended business logic set, you will be better off doing it with PHP. There are a lot of things which we are currently doing with Go. I'm actually writing Go as well. Don't get me wrong, I love Go. I think that it is a fantastic tool for what it is. But some things that we are doing, we went through them and we said, should we turn this to Go? And for some things, the answer was no. No, it's not a good idea to go there. Either for the medium term or even forever. Some things will always be PHP for us. Some things will turn to Go. PHP, in my opinion, has the Achilles heel of the cycle of creation, work, destruction, which is inherited from the early days of the Apache SAPI. And modern day Nginx Fast CGI is doing exactly the same thing. I think that if we ever see a PHP which is running over a just-in-time compiler, interpreter, however you want to call it, and be able to remain alive all the time and serve requests without having to reinitialize everything, I think that this will give us the opportunity to do a lot of things more that we are currently switching to Go. And I think that this will be a breath of new life for PHP. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this will ever happen. Obviously, the powers that be decide those things, not myself or people like us. But I think that if there was a PHP like that, personally, I don't know what Altenar would do, but personally, as Ioannis, I would not write Go at all for my personal stuff.
All right. What do you think about the non-dying runtimes like Roadrunner and Franken PHP? Do you follow the news about these things?
I will not say that I am well versed in them. I have seen them, I have tried them a little bit. I am by no means an expert. What I got out of them is that, yes, they are steps towards the right direction, but they lose a little bit of the ease of PHP. They make things more complicated. Certainly usable. I would like something a little bit better, easier, more intuitive. Like you don't need to change what you do in PHP to actually, which I don't know if it's doable, to be honest, because the paradigm shift is very big. I don't know if it's doable, really. Let's say that I'm dreaming right now.
Okay. And overall, do you like what PHP is becoming today? Because it tries to catch up with other languages. It takes a lot from Kotlin, from other places. It changes syntaxes. Do you like those changes?
There are some things which I say, okay, yeah, that's usable. I can use it. There are some other things which I don't like. For example, the new promotion of the constructor parameters to variables. I don't like it. I mean, why? Okay, I don't like it. It works, of course. Nothing changes, doesn't do any harm, really. In my opinion, it makes the code a little bit uglier. And it is a little bit unintuitive. why would parameters become properties? Of course, you do that on purpose, right? You write the code to do it.
Yeah.
So you know what's happening. But there have been people who were really, messed up because they had forgotten that this is happening. And somehow they said, like, where did this came from? And I saw them spending like 5 minutes going through the code. And in the end saying, oh, right. This is a promotion, a parameter promotion. But that's personal preference, right? All of those things are personal preferences. You don't like it, you don't use it. It's fine. Philosophically, I don't like the fact that PHP is playing catch-up. It feels like somewhat PHP is running out of steam and is trying to emulate other people to remain in the game. I don't know if that's the case really, or it's just appearances, but to me this doesn't look good philosophically. I think that PHP has its own power, its own character, its own use cases, which are very big, and probably should try to move forward autonomously rather than trying to make copies of things that other people do. But that's philosophical. I mean,
Yeah, I understand that we basically think of things that catch up like of something weak. On the other hand, we have demand for some features which people see in other languages, especially the ones who, again, write microservices and they switch back from one language to another. And they got used that here you can do something very fast. You can write property promotion. Here you can't. So they say that let's do that. And by the way, talking about the property promotion, as an author of library which does a static reflection for PHP, which kind of tries to, without auto-loading classes, to replicate the native reflection and give actually some other information, I've realized that you can see that property promotion, it breaks the single responsibility principle because you now have two things in one, and you have some restrictions on that reflection. So this property doesn't have a default value. The default value is for parameter only, so the property doesn't. Although in the code you see like it's a default for both. If it's a promoted property, then it should have that default value. But in fact, technically this cannot be achieved because this is first of all the parameter and then the property. And so you see all those signs of that something is not really good because, this is a compromise. But yeah, on the other hand, I've got used to writing that code because it's pretty fast to have a DTO like that. It makes sense and it doesn't at the same time.
Yeah, this thing about the speed of code writing, it's really, really, really a non-issue for me. I am the person who will sit at the monitor staring at something for an hour without doing anything while I'm formulating everything in my head. And then I just start writing. I write it down like, as if you turn a cake mold and plop, the cake falls ready. This is how I work. And in general, I am not concerned about this. I don't care how much time it takes me to write the code. My biggest concern is always how I do things, how I manage to accomplish the task, how the functionality is created on a more, if you will, architectural level. I don't know if it's the correct way to express it, but I'm more interested about the deeper conditions and the deeper quality of the code, rather than if it took me 5 minutes to write it or 10 minutes to write it, or if it's promotion, or if it's not promotion, or whatever. So I don't care too much for things which are created in order to make you write faster. In the very end, I think that the power of the software engineer is not to try to become ChatGPT, where you tell him something and brrr, everything is on screen, rather than being able to produce code which will be high quality in the sense of low maintenance, low issues, and low bugs for the foreseeable future.
Awesome words. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the conference and then wrap it up. It actually appeared that you are the only foreign speaker at the whole High Load, and I feel proud that you are in the PHP part of the conference. So this is cool. How do you feel about this? And I saw you talking to a lot of people. I think you didn't know most of them before.
No.
And this is really nice that you found some people to talk to, and it was interesting. So tell me about your experience at the Russian conference.
It was a very, very nice experience, to be honest. This is the biggest conference I have been to. I have been to other conferences before, but not to that scale. It was very nice that I met a lot of fantastic people, fantastic minds. Mr. Makarov comes to mind, for example, who is probably the lead contributor of Yii framework.
And he actually came up with the idea to make this conference PHP Russia in 2019. So he's the author of.
Okay, I didn't knew that. Yeah, he's. The man is fantastic. What do you say about this guy? He's excellent. And for me, it was also a little bit of a validation. Like, okay, I'm not crazy. Because speaking to him and to other people who are very smart and they have done a lot more things than me and far more visible things than me, we actually think more or less in the same way, and through completely independent histories and pathways, we have reached the same conclusions. So we were sitting at a table and I was asked, like, okay, I'm the main contributor of Yii, what do you think about my framework? And I told him, I like it, but there are some things which, not really. And we discussed those things, and it turns out that on Yii 3, all of these things have changed. And I was like, okay, I love you now. There is no inheritance. For example, all classes are made final. Everything is an interface. Plugins and all of these things are so open that they can be used even without the main framework itself. I think they did something with behaviors, which I really didn't like. So independent people, totally different, reaching the same conclusions, makes me feel that, okay, I'm not crazy. And of course, hearing so smart people saying this kind of makes you feel that, okay, we are in a good path.
So do you think there's a difference in the level of developers in Russia and in other countries which you worked in?
So I have come to the conclusion that more or less everywhere it's the same about people. There is a difference about distribution. In some countries, I think Russia is probably included in that. The distribution is not the classic normal distribution where you see, from useless to average to extremely bright. It's more polarized. Either you see people who are incredible, or you see people who are really not good.
So it's normal distribution inverted.
It seems like that. Some people, I have been interfacing and seeing Russian programmers even outside of Altenar, even before. And sometimes, many times, I was completely awestruck. Like, how did this guy think of that, right? And then I have met other people from Russia who are like robots. They take the manual, they open the manual, step one, step two, step two. So I don't think it is a matter of intellect, not at all. Actually, Russian people, to me, seem to be very, very smart. I think it's mostly about how they are educated. It seems to me that a lot of people are not let free. They are created with molds, like that's how you must be, that's how you must work, that's what it is. And it comes around to what we were speaking about in the beginning. Yes, best practices are fine, but you need to be able to get out of their limits. You need to be able to understand the whole picture and then choose the best practices as a choice, not because somebody told you that this is the best thing to do. So if I would find one issue that some Russian programmers need to fix, is that to learn to be more autonomous, more independent, and to be more audacious, if you will. Do things the other way because I want to do it that way, and that's it. I would never consider Russians inferior in their science or in their results. No, not at all. Just some of the Russian people that I have met through the years need to change a little bit their perspective in that regard. Technically, like as far as knowledge is concerned, I will tell you that Russian programmers are actually more knowledgeable than most of the programmers that I know. They seem to actually absorb all the technical details, all the information, all the everything. And it's a pity that they don't let themselves use these things. It's as if some people are actually self-limiting because they have to follow the norm. Break the norm, don't do that. Use your knowledge and do anything. It doesn't matter if you fail. Failure is a good thing. Okay, if you fail and you lose a few $1 million or billions of rubles or whatever, yes, that's not a good thing. That's not what I mean, obviously, right? But it doesn't have to be in production. You can do every kind of silly stuff in your personal projects, in staging environments or wherever.
All right, thank you. I think we can almost finish with this, but I have to ask one more short question. Is PHP dead?
The people who say that PHP is dead are brain dead.
All right. So if you would like to add something at the end of our interview, please say, and we'll finish.
Thank you for extending this invitation to me. It was a great pleasure to be here. It is a bit sad that there were no more English speakers. It's a little bit sad that politics ruin a lot of things.
Yes.
But it is what it is. Such is life. I think that if there is something that somebody should take from this interview, is that basically we must learn not to limit ourselves, not to be dogmatic with tools, with practices, with anything. After all, if you feel that everything has been conquered, we have all the best practices, we have all the solutions or whatever, why do you do this job? Why? What's the joy in actually copy-pasting virtually, concepts or whatever? I think that most people should be happy with what they do. And I cannot believe that somebody is happy copy-pasting other things that other people did a few years ago. So, research, don't limit yourselves, find new stuff, make better stuff, because we have a lot to learn. Nothing is finalized, nothing is fixed, nothing is so and not any other way.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you again one day somewhere.
Who knows, maybe next year.
All right, thank you.